Hi, everyone. Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks here. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. We've got a great episode for you today. We're going to be hearing from Ivan Tornos. He's the CEO of Zimmer Biomet, and he'll be our opening keynote conversation at DeviceTalks Boston. He sat down with Joe Mullings and myself while Joe and I were at Mullings Studio and talked about his couple of years as CEO at Zimmer Biomet, some of the changes that have come, and of course what drives him. And we'll be talking about those issues and many more at DeviceTalks Boston. Wouldn't be surprised if there was an opportunity for a Q&A as well. So I hope you'll join us at DeviceTalks Boston on April 30th and May 1st. Then following my conversation with Ivan Tornos, I will talk with Alan Lotvin. He's the CEO and co-founder of Sequel MedTech, which is developing a new automated insulin delivery pump, and it's called Sequel. The company is called Sequel. You'll find out why, but it is the follow-up to a insulin pump that was developed by a very famous inventor. So I'll leave it there. But Alan brings a great deal of experience to Sequel. Not only, actually not much as a medtech guy. His experience has been, he's a physician, he's been in PBMs, but he was also at CVS, had a senior position there. So really brings a great understanding of how a product like Sequel's automated insulin delivery pump called Twiist, how it fits into the broader healthcare spectrum. So I know you'll enjoy that conversation. I hope you'll also enjoy the conversation we're having on Tuesday at 4 p.m. on Device Talks Tuesdays. It's brought to you by VitalPath, and it's called Design Considerations for Complex Laser Cut and Welding Components. So looking forward to having that conversation. It'll be kind of it won't be a dense PowerPoint presentation. It'll be more of a conversation. There will be slides and there'll be the things you need to see, but we're hoping that you'll come with your questions as well and be part of that conversation. So you can register for that at DeviceTalks.com. You can find out about DeviceTalks Boston at DeviceTalks.com or go to boston.devicetalks.com. You can also, of course, register for DeviceTalks Minnesota, which is happening on June 11th at the McNamara Convention Center. So lots going on here at DeviceTalks. Can't wait to see you at one or all of those events. And if you're interested in saving a little money as you register for DeviceTalks Boston, please, our loyal podcast listeners, know you can use the code DTWeekly25 and save 25% off the price of registration. So really hope to see you there at DeviceTalks Boston. The numbers look great. We had 1,400 people there last year. We'll have more this year. And anyone who has gone, I think, will tell you it's an exceptional event to be at. And it's an honor for me to help put it together. So I hope you'll join us there. Again, go to boston.devicetalks.com. And if you want to save some money, use the code DTWeekly25. That's exclusive for podcast listeners. And you will save 25% off the price of registration. All right. Without any further delay, let's get this podcast started. All right. You ready for this?
Ready.
Hey everyone, this is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. I'm here once again at 160 Studios with my friend Joe Mullings. Thanks for having me down here, Joe.
Good to be part.
We're here to talk about our upcoming DeviceTalks Boston meeting, and I'm thrilled beyond belief to have as our opening keynote conversation. I'm going to be talking with Ivan Tornos, the CEO of Zimmer Biomet, and he's gracious enough to join us here today in the studio. Ivan, thank you for taking some time this morning to give us an update on where Zimmer Biomet's at.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. So you've had a lot of news lately, and we'll cover a few areas that we'll be covering more extensively at DeviceTalks Boston. But I've seen a lot of news in terms of your portfolio. You've gotten some critical, I think, FDA approvals. You've got the acquisition you just announced of Paragon 28 a couple of weeks ago. So give us an update, if you would, please, of your portfolio, where it stands, and where is it headed?
Yeah, thank you. It's a different company. It's a totally different company. I joined Zimmer Biomet in late 2018. At the time, we're purely an orthopedic company doing mostly hips and knees. Didn't have much of what we call a set portfolio, sports, extremities, trauma. and other categories in non-reconstructive areas. We don't have any technology. As we enter 2025, we have a diversified portfolio. We're going to be launching 50 new products in the next 36 months.
Wow.
We have leading capabilities in predictive analytics, obviously robotics. We recently acquired a company that we love. It's called OrthoGrid, which is the fastest, most elegant navigation that I've seen in hip reconstruction. In what we call SET, we have a sports medicine business platform that is growing 22%. To your point, Paragon 28 is going to enable Zimmer Biomet to meaningfully enter foot and ankle. We're launching 3 robotic applications in the next 18 months. I can ramble for the next hour, but the punchline is this is not the same Zimmer Biomet that I joined 6 years ago.
Ivan, with this portfolio expansion, if somebody's watching from the sidelines carefully, you're broadening your engagement with the customer. And historically, the customer, in most of the ortho companies that are still out there today, it's been the surgeon. But it seems like you're directing your efforts and your portfolio expansion in other areas. Can you discuss that?
Yeah, Joe. So Zimmer Biomet in business since 1927 historically has been a company focused in the operation and addressing the needs of one customer, the physician. Today, Zimmer Biomet is thinking the entire episode of care, what happens before surgery, what happens obviously during the surgery, what happens after the surgery, across the entire ecosystem of customers. That's the patient, that's the physician, that's the provider, the hospital, and that is the payer. And the way that we think about Zimmer Biomet is about the meaningful problems that we can solve for that ecosystem of customers, patients, physicians, providers, and payers. And we focus on 4 key problems today. Number 1 is awareness. And that's the number 1 reason why my buddy Arnold Schwarzenegger is now our Chief Movement Officer. Arthritis, osteoarthritis, is a disease that impacts 600 million people on Earth every year. And less than 5% of those patients actually do something about it. So you can do the math here quickly. That means that you got 570 million people living in pain that should be doing something about it. That doesn't mean that 570 million people are going to get a knee replacement, hip replacement, but a large chunk of those patients should be doing something. So problem number 1 is awareness. And we're going to address that through direct-to-patient, direct-to-consumer, and other means. The second problem we're trying to solve as a company is infection, which happens more often than it needs to happen, and it can be deadly. If you go get your hip replacement and you get an infection, the probability of you dying is actually higher than a prostate cancer, a melanoma, or a breast cancer.
Wow.
And there are different ways to solve that problem. Things that you can do before surgery, things you can do during the surgery. The third problem is outcomes, and that is both clinical and economic outcomes. Procedures are getting costlier. We got to do something differently in that regard. And satisfaction rates are not where they need to be. 1 of every 5 patients that goes through a knee procedure will report dissatisfaction with the knee procedure. And then the fourth and final problem we're trying to solve as a company is efficiency. We believe you don't need to be in the episode of treatment 2 to 3 years, like is the case today. We believe that you may not need to go to a hospital. You can go to an ASC for a large amount of these patients. We don't like the fact that you need to be in surgery for an hour plus. We think that you can actually do those knee procedures in a lesser amount of time without compromising outcomes or safety. We don't believe they need to go to a physical therapy rehab center to take care of the rehab after the surgery. So again, we're going to address those 4 problems: awareness, infection, efficiency, and outcomes. And to do this well, you have to start thinking early on, who is the patient? What is the situation of that specific patient? How do we personalize the surgery? How is that patient going to get treated? With what technology in the operating room? That ultimately determines the outcome and the type of physical therapy you're going to have after that. So it's a more holistic scenario that thinks the before, during, and after, the patient, the physician, the provider, and payer, and how we merge best-in-class technology with the leading products out there.
So Ivan, when we think about classic ortho companies, they tend to be metal and plastic, and that's the technology portfolio. And you've been bold. Zimmer's been bold since you've been at the helm, and you've expanded this out to the digital domain, up and above robotics as well. How do you think about breaking that category into this market that has not been a digital forward market before, outside perhaps robot?
Yeah. It's been a Herculean task, and I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. But I'll tell you, it's early innings. We got to do so much more. First of all, to change the mindset of orthopedic surgeons is complicated, right? These are individuals that have been accustomed to using certain products, limited technology, getting trained on doing surgeries the way that surgeries have been done the last 60, 65 years with little innovation. We believe we can do things differently, and we are doing things differently. We believe that what happens before the surgery is just as important, if not more important, than what happens during the surgery. We believe that bringing technology that reduces operating time without compromising outcomes is going to change the standard of care. And we believe that getting the patient engaged in a technological journey is gonna drive better outcomes. To that extent, we have best-in-class partnerships today with Apple around informatics, how the patient's mobility before the surgery guides what the surgery is going to look like. We collect data in the surgery that enables a protocol for physical therapy after the surgery. So it's a totally different type of journey. And again, I think it's early innings. I'm really proud of the fact that we're not alone in this journey. Other great companies, peers of ours, are doing the same thing. And that's an all boats rise type of a scenario. We are going to transform how orthopedic surgeries are done. And I do envision at one point that metal and plastic, as you call it, potentially won't be the leading discussion when you think about a surgery. The how you do the surgery will be more important than the what do you implant in that surgery. And that's part of the technological revolution that we're seeing here.
Can we talk a bit about where the surgery is being done? As we're recording this, we're just before we pushed record, talked about some turmoil in the healthcare provider space, some layoffs we're beginning to see now. Obviously, the ASCs have been rising in importance both for patients, but also for medtech companies. How are you adapting your approach to healthcare providers? What kind of emphasis are you giving to ASCs that maybe you weren't giving before?
Sure. ASCs are here to stay, and the migration of cases to an ASC is just going to blow up. We continue to engage in market research to understand what blowing up means, and the numbers are staggering. We believe today, as we enter 2025, that roughly 40 to 60% of all the cases, orthopedic cases that are being done in an inpatient, HOPD, hospital outpatient, are going to move to an ASC. And it's not lost on me, that's a wide range, 40 to 60%, right? I mean, that's a huge margin. That tells you that most people don't even know. But that's a huge percentage. Speaking of percentages, in 2019, 2% of the sales of Zimmer Biomet, we do about $8 billion per year, were happening in an ASC. Today, that number in the US is closer to 20%. So wow. Roughly $4.5 billion in knees and hips in the US, and 20% of those procedures are done in an ASC. It really is the one place where everybody wants to have the surgery happen. If you're a patient, you want to do your case away from sicker patients, right? Go on a Saturday morning, get your knee done, be home the same night. If you're a provider or a payer, actually you save money bringing those cases to an ASC. And you're a physician, is the same element, right? You do deliver a faster surgery, economically it makes sense for you. It's an overall better experience. So the ASC is truly that juxtaposition that makes sense for all key customers. We're going to continue to invest in ASCs. We think about ASCs from an innovation standpoint around how do we increase safety, how do we drive efficiency, how do we deliver the best outcomes. We have innovation that is purely designed for ASCs. We're always thinking site of care now. Will this product make economic and clinical sense in an ASC? What are different designs that make more sense in an ASC versus an inpatient outpatient? So it's changed everything. It's changed how we commercialize products, how we innovate, how we think about the customer, how we think about technology, and it's here to stay.
Ivan, it's always admirable and inspirational following you and your journeys around the globe as a leader of Zimmer, the leader in the ortho space. Where do you get the energy, my friend? I mean, I've redlined it for 15, 20 years, and I'm trying to keep up with you. Where are you getting this energy from?
I love the question. It's purpose. Some people talk about purpose. Some always leave the purpose. I lost my father when I was 5 to disease. He was 45, I was 5. My uncle became my pseudo-father. He died at the age of 45 as well. My brother died in my arms, July 4th, 2010. at the age of 44. He didn't even make it to 45. It would have been 45 years later. It is one thing that drives me is tackling disease, making life better for the millions of patients that deserve a better life. So it truly is purpose. That's what drives my energy. That's what inspires me. I made the money that I had to make in my life many, many years ago when I sold a company. What drives me today is to help others. And waking up in the morning and seeing those numbers that I mentioned earlier, that is 570 million people living in pain, that's enough for me to grab a couple of Diet Cokes, get on a plane, and go somewhere else. Beyond that, hey, it's leading by example. I'm never going to hold people accountable to do things that I'm not willing to do. And I'm never going to ask people to be in front of customers if I'm not willing to be in front of customers. So combination of purpose and leadership by example is what drives me every day, Joe. And I know you do the same thing. That's what we love partnering with you.
Love it, and what a great way to sort of bring this to an end.
Absolutely. As I stated on LinkedIn, you put yourself out there for the world to see, and I'm grateful for the honesty and for seeing how you go through life day to day, and the reasons you just gave are reasons enough. And I look forward to unpacking a bit more and learning more about you and sharing your story with our attendees at DeviceTalks Boston on April 30th and May 1st. Thank you so much for helping us start off right.
Great to be here. I love what the both of you, Tom, Joe, are doing. You guys are revolutionizing a word that I cannot pronounce, medtech, and you guys are making medtech a much better word. So keep doing what you're doing, keep winning. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, really looking forward to talking to Ivan Tornos at DeviceTalks Boston. Once again, register at boston.devicetalks.com, and when you do, use the code DTWeekly25 to save 25%. Now let's start my conversation with Dr. Alan Lotvin of Sequel MedTech. Well, Alan Lotvin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tom. Pleasure to be here, and thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure. Well, you've got I typically start these podcasts trying to unpack people's careers, and yours is going to take a little bit of time because it's varied. And I always start these conversations by asking how you got into medtech, but your arrival to medtech, I think, is fairly recent. So I think we're going to start at the beginning, which is always a good place to start. You decided to become a doctor at some point. You're a cardiologist, correct?
That's correct.
What led you to that path, and why didn't that stick?
Good question. So my tongue-in-cheek answer is I knew I wanted to be a doctor when I could understand the words my parents were mouthing at me in the crib. Right. So
were they mouthing doctor or
exactly? You want to be a doctor, and so it was. I can't honestly tell you when I decided I wanted to be a doctor. I always was fascinated by obviously the science and complexity of the human body, the ability to have an impact and make a difference. Really was important, and candidly, my parents really were quite the prototypical New York, you're going to be better parents, better than us, right? So I ended up going to medical school. I found my way into cardiology largely because I had a very kind of let's do something mentality, let's fix things mentality. And cardiology, when I was just at that point in my career, had just really entered its very, very dynamic medtech phase. So you're asking how to get to medtech. Mm-hmm. Well, I trained in cardiology at almost the dawn of stent placement, angioplasty, electrophysiology. And so I got the exposure, all these incredible tools. And I was an interventional cardiologist and practiced out of the New York area for about 5 years and really had all this incredible technology at my fingertips, right? What plain old-fashioned balloon angioplasty, as we used to call it. Stents, drug-eluting stents, laser atherectomy devices that would literally shave off pieces of the plaque. It was fantastic and fascinating and incredible. And at that time, I also was a part of a small group of people that invented a device for percutaneous and a non-surgical mitral valve repair. So I've always sort of had this med tech sort of thing. I left practice in 1997 after having built a pretty big practice for a pretty straightforward reason, which was it was very clear to me, based on the data that was available then, it was only 10 or 11 years into the angioplasty era, that probably half of all the angioplasties that I was being asked to do didn't need to be done. And that was because what's very clear is that if you're in the middle of an acute heart attack, you want an angioplasty. If you're not, it's a lot more subtle. But the problem is that it makes a lot of sense, right? You see a blockage, you open the blockage up, you got a pretty picture. The reality is we never have really demonstrated that routine angioplasty makes anyone live longer or live better. So if that's the case, why do it? And, also I'd done several thousand by that time. It was like, 2,501. It's like, and look, I really enjoyed doing procedures. I thought it was a real, you could make a huge difference to people.
People don't realize how young this industry really is. And when you say
it's incredible.
It's true. I mean, we talk about the Boston Scientifics and the Medtronics have been around for a few decades more than that, but things really started to take root in the 90s around the period you're describing. It's really remarkable.
No, that's exactly right. And the pace of change has been incredible. And again, I don't want to mislead anyone. Like, angioplasties and stents have an incredibly important role. They have saved millions of lives. But, like everything else, you got to know when to do it, when not to do it. So at the same time, I was really interested in this nascent field, what was being called then big data and, disease management. Now we would call it population health management and AI. And I found myself almost randomly in the pharmacy industry, and specifically kind of got to PBMs and specialty pharmacies. And I spent most of my career in specialty pharmacy. And specialty pharmacy are drugs that are $10,000 to $1 million. I built one of the early ones at Medco. We acquired another company called Accredo. It became really large. And that was like in 2002 or 3. And people would ask me, like, Alan, how did you know that specialty was going to grow so much? Because back then it was like 1% of the drug spend, and now probably close to 55. And depending on how obnoxious I feel like being, I'll either say because I'm a genius, or I tell the truth and I say I didn't. Right? It was a hard problem that a company needed help solving, and so I helped solve it. But I realized pretty quickly this was going to be a very interesting run and a fantastically fascinating space to be in because of the complexity of the patients, the amount of biotech technology coming to bear. This was early in the antibody era. So I basically spent the next essentially 2002 to 2017 in specialty pharmacy in one way, shape, or form, either at Medco or at CVS Health or a company called Icor. And then in 2017 or 18, I turned over the reins to my very, very able longtime lieutenant, and he's done a fantastic job. And did a couple other things for CVS, and then for the last 3 years that I was there, from 2020 to 2023, I ran Caremark, which is the largest PBM in the country. And despite the rhetoric around PBMs, I'll go to bat to say, if you think that drug prices would be lower without concentrated negotiating power, I got a beautiful bridge to sell you.
Well, I'm glad to have that perspective, because it's obviously the anti-PBM rhetoric.
It's the error, and
very
look,
strong.
at the end of the day, these are complex businesses. I would just make one sort of PSA for people, which is the purchasers of PBM services are incredibly sophisticated companies. To think that Microsoft and Apple and JP Morgan are being hoodwinked is not reasonable, particularly because they're supported by a ton of consultants. And what ends up happening is that the boogeyman that people will say that 50% of the sales price gets captured by middlemen is just patently false. I mean, the companies have publicly told you that 98 to 99% of all the money that comes back from pharma goes back to customers. It's people talk about this thing called the gross to net bubble. That's called a discount, right? And if you want to pay the gross price, okay, pay the gross price. Anyway, we don't have to talk about PBMs. But I will tell you, having been in the industry for a very long time, I'll tell you that, and I know most of the people in it. These are people who wake up in the morning trying to say, how do I lower the cost of healthcare?
So that's great to hear. And yeah, you do hear, the Mark Cubans of the world out there with their efforts, and his whole thesis is based upon the PBMs. We need to work around the PBMs.
Yeah, look, I think what Mark Cuban is doing is actually a needed service, right? The problem with drug pricing is that no one wants 250,000 different prices, because that's how many different drugs there are, and they change every day based on demand. So you end up creating pricing that's a basket. You want to pay this much for generics and this much for brands, but they all cost a different amount. And then you're trying to, so that always leads an opportunity for mispricing. And I think that clearly, I'm not telling you the industry is perfect or any industry is perfect. And I think the efforts by Mark Cuban and others to bring transparency and sort of full pass-through, it's fine. I'm 100% in favor of it. And if I was still in my old job, I'd be 100% doing it.
Fascinating. I going back to your move into that sector. I mean, you kind of glossed over. I can't think of a way to remain in healthcare, but do something almost so completely different than what you were doing. To be an interventional cardiologist, where you even had a role in creating some medical technology, to moving over to more of the financial management side of the things, where you were touching patients even less. How did you make that decision? Because it seems like completely different mindset and skill set.
So like I said, I was really interested in this idea of big data sets and applying big data sets to population health. And so I sort of made the decision that, and along the way, I got a degree in medical informatics from Columbia. So I kind of felt like I knew something, but really, like most degrees, it was a great experience. But so what I traded was huge impact on a couple of thousand people a year for much, much, much less impact on 20 or 30 million people a year. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at the drug database, it has two really interesting aspects to it. Number one, it's a real-time database, right? Because it gets uploaded literally in real time as you present at the drugstore. And the second is it represents what actually goes into the body versus what someone wants to get paid for. Mm-hmm. So if you get a prescription for atorvastatin, Lipitor, I can make a reasonable assumption that you have high cholesterol. And when you look at the patterns of drug prescribing and drug adherence and persistence, meaning people continue to take their meds, they're awful. They were awful then, and they're awful now. If you can imagine a drug combination that doesn't make sense, I can find it for you in someone. And I thought and still think that there's an opportunity to use these large data sets to improve care, right? So if you are on I'm going to date myself for a second, but we'll use modern stuff, right? If you're on metformin and insulin, mm-hmm. you very likely have type 2 diabetes. Why aren't you on a GLP-1 these days, right? If you're on metformin and an SGLT inhibitor, why aren't you on a lipid-lowering drug? Like those sorts of things. And are you on the right doses? Because most of these things need to be titrated to get to effective doses. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of opportunity to help people and augment their or complement their physicians. I would tell you the industry has been, kind of the health support industry has also been modestly successful. I think we could be more. And you'll see what happens as we bring better tools and better behavior modification tools and better personal assistance tools to people.
Fascinating.
So that's what I was trying to do. I traded a lot of impact on little people for less impact on lots of people.
But I often wonder, and I don't want to delve too deep, but it seems like when you get into, you're definitely dealing with a lot more people, but they're more abstract. You're not seeing the people. Yeah. And how do you maintain that drive? Like if you're doing this for a decade or so, and you're not actually maybe seeing the patients that you were seeing before, but you're waking up in the morning saying, "I have a mission. This is my mission." How do you stay on mission and keep and remain inspired?
That's a really good question. So I started at Medco in this clinical role of kind of disease management, and then did two business roles. And then when it was time to start this specialty pharmacy, the CEO at the time laid out 4 things that people needed to be successful in. And number 1 was being a clinician, because like these were incredibly complex patients who had been really challenged, not well served in a lot of ways, because if you had, rheumatoid arthritis and were on Enbrel those days when it was still relatively less used, you went to your corner drugstore, the person had never seen an Enbrel prescription before, didn't know how to help you manage it. So we built these very clinically focused pods of pharmacists, support workers, social workers if needed, to help people manage their condition, not just their drug. And so that evolved over time, particularly when I joined CVS, where we actually brought nurses directly into the mix. So we created these care teams of pharmacists, nurses, financial support people, to ensure that people who were using these very complex drugs and got the support. And I'll give you one very, very quick story. We had patients with cystic fibrosis, and they would have a hard time. Cystic fibrosis is a lung disease. And there's a great drug from Vertex, but they'd have a hard time showering because the steam would make them short of breath. Then trying to towel off was too much exertion. And I remember listening in on a phone call, and the pharmacist went through their kind of discussion of some of the drug issues, and then, asked the person if they had anything else to talk about. And we'll say, yeah, I got this problem. Because let me connect you. Let me have you talk to our nurse. She knows everything there is to know about cystic fibrosis. And the nurse was on the phone for 26 seconds, and she said, get a terry cloth bathrobe. Like the most obvious statement in the world. Like once you hear it, it's like, oh yeah. But you just take a shower, get a terry cloth bathrobe, just wrap yourself up and sit down. And you won't be cold, you'll be dry, and you won't have to exert yourself. And she had just known that from, years of taking. And so that's, so stories like that definitely help. We had examples. One of the companies we owned was a home infusion company. And one guy who was on incredibly complex regimen of chemotherapy wanted to go back to India to see his daughter's wedding and to arrange transport of not just medical equipment, like he needed several pumps and a nurse, but he needed all of this medicine that was, it's little powders. Like people don't like transporting little powders across, international border. And so getting the pictures back from that guy of him being able to go to his daughter's wedding was like, it's great. So lots of different ways of getting, that, dopamine hit of helping people take care of their health.
That's great. Just I want to get into SQL, of course, in a moment, but I do want to unpack your time at CVS Health. You mentioned you're president of CVS Health Caremark and executive vice president of CVS Health, and you're also had been chief transformation officer at CVS Health before that. Yeah. CVS Health, I mean, you and I are both Massachusetts, New England people, so it's obviously located here, but it's a national chain. It's been very ambitious in trying to take a broader role in healthcare. Share, if you will, a few lessons from your time there. And if you want to talk about what went right, maybe what's not going right, or what needs to change. But I just would love your broader perspective before we go into the medtech solution that you're working on right now.
So the company for a long time, even before I got there, because I think they bought Minute Clinic in 2007 or 2008.
That sounds right.
They had this idea about they would phrase it as the retailization of healthcare, and recognizing that access to care is a real problem in many parts of the country. And so the first thing that the company did with Minute Clinic was really bring this kind of acute care therapy much, much closer to people. And Minute Clinic was if you look at their ability to take care of this sort of relatively simple things, they were fantastic. And so then, as we went through the 20 teens or so, it became clearer that we had half of the picture, but not the other half. And so there was a drive at that point in many companies to sort of reintegrate PBMs and health insurers. and in addition to start to bring more care delivery assets into that ecosystem. And it was driven in a lot of ways by this desire to build more value-based care, right?
Mm-hmm.
So value-based care meaning I really want to pay for outcomes. I want to pay for results, not for just activity. And it was and remains a very good idea. It also was and is a very difficult thing to execute on because of as much as we like to think we have deep knowledge about human disease, which still was a pretty complex machine that we're only scratching the surface of. So when CVS bought Aetna, we sort of said, okay, like now we have to sort of not just integrate these two companies, because quite frankly, CVS has always been very good about buying things and integrating them and creating either a more reliable, more consistent, or more efficient service. But we had to define what was the next set of products and services that we were going to offer. And so the first thing we tried to do was to put together more care management programs focused on the retail outlets. And candidly, it didn't work as well as we thought, and for a lot of different reasons. Part of it was we got severely distracted by a little thing called COVID, and where I think actually the company did an amazing job, right? In terms of, we built some of the first drive-through, testing centers. Like we literally would set up.
I remember
in parking lots. They were up here.
I chose to forget, but now that you bring it up, I remember.
Yeah,
Gosh,
from a vaccination perspective, I think the retail pharmacy channel became an incredibly important vaccination. I don't remember the percentages. I know at some point about what percent of Americans were vaccinated through the retail pharmacy channel, but that became sort of a little bit of a distraction in trying to do other things. And candidly, look, it's always hard to take two or in some cases, in this case, three large companies, each of which with their own culture, and put them together. So I think the company has made a really big move to continue that path with the acquisition of Oak and others, and not just because I'm still a shareholder, but because my friends are all there. I wish them the best and I think the world of them. I think the team that's in place there, David Joyner is really, really smart and really cares about people. Prem Shah is a guy I've known for my entire life, or my entire working life basically, and he's incredible. These are people who really wake up in the morning and try to think about how to help people take better care of themselves.
Oh, that's great. And I'm a customer and a fan as well. They're giving me my vaccinations and get me all my medical supplies. So I wish them well also. So let's now I want to understand how your experience at CVS and throughout your career gave you the perspective that led you to co-found Sequel. Let's first just take a moment and introduce people to Sequel. Is it Sequel or Sequel MedTech? I want to make sure.
So their official title is Sequel MedTech. We all call it Sequel.
Okay.
And it's called Sequel because the one of my other co-founders is a guy named Dean Kamen, who invented the first wearable insulin pump, and this product is the sequel to that.
That's probably one of the most appropriately named companies that I've ever come upon. So yeah.
So I'll tell you how we got here. So one was, as I had spent 25 years more in the administrative side of healthcare, the one thing I sort of missed was really deep exposure to science and technology. And one of the projects I've been working on at CVS was a home hemodialysis device, which is how I met Dean Kamen. And as I spent more and more time with Dean, he's got obviously an incredibly rich and an idea minute. So I would see all the things that he was working on, not all of them, but many of the things he was working on, and I was really intrigued by the what we now call Twiist, and I thought it was a huge opportunity to solve a bunch of unmet needs in healthcare. Diabetes is one of those disease states that we should be much better at treating. Mm-hmm. But we're not, and we're not for two reasons. One, I think one is a technology, right? every system, and an AID system has three pieces, is only as good as its weakest link. And there really hasn't been new delivery technology in 25 years. The second was, when you talk to people living with diabetes, it's not just the technology that they have to deal with, but it's the burden of dealing with the system, right? So, they would get a pump from a manufacturer, supplies from the DME vendor, insulin from a pharmacy. They might have gotten their CGM from another DME vendor or from a pharmacy, and none of those people talk to each other. So, we really thought that there was an opportunity to make not just better technology, but bring it to market in a way that made it much easier for people. Mm-hmm. And so we've tried to, create a convenience kit that has everything you need. So it's almost a one-stop shop, except, sensor and insulin. We've put it on the pharmacy benefit to make it, more accessible. We've really approached our internal customer service development by saying, like, our job here is to solve problems. It's not to send you back to your doctor. Now, obviously, for some things, we're going to send you back to your doctor. We're not taking care. We're not providing medical care. But it's really, we want to solve as many problems as we can. So if you're having a challenge with getting something, we're going to help steer you in the right direction. We'll have nurse educators or diabetes educators on the phones as well. So we're really trying to create a great technology, but brought to market in the best fashion. And sort of my background in kind of large companies and understanding the needs of 1 million or 500,000 people with diabetes really helped. The other thing that helped about my background was we recognize that there's a real wave now for despite GLP-1s for people with intensive insulin therapy who have type 2 diabetes to be on AID systems, but they're very hard to find those people, right? Not hard to find them.
AID? I'm sorry,
automated insulin delivery. Okay, my error. So automated insulin delivery systems, pump, sensor, and algorithm. Mm-hmm. And the ADA recently last year said basically anyone using intensive insulin therapy should be on an automated insulin delivery system. Think about it as I'm gonna overly simplify it,
please.
But think about it as an artificial pancreas. They are nowhere near as good as your pancreas. I'm not trying to say that, but it basically is trying to mimic the function of your pancreas by measuring your glucose, not in the blood, in the interstitial fluid, and then using an algorithm deciding how much insulin to give, and then directing the insulin delivery device to give that much, and then kind of doing that over and over again. And so what we want to do with recognizing that people with type 2 are often seen by primary care doctors who may not have as much facility or familiarity with these devices is to try to use larger organizations who pay for healthcare to say, look, people who are on these devices, they're number one, most importantly, healthier. Number two, because they're healthier, they consume less resources. Mm-hmm. So let us, in a non-branded way, let us help you identify those people and either get them to endocrinologists who can help them get on the right therapies, or introduce them to the concept to see if they're interested. So there's a lot of different ways where my background sort of helped. Then the last one, obviously, is we're going to take this to the pharmacy benefit, and that's been a challenge for a lot of companies. And obviously, I know how to make an offering attractive to pharmacy benefit managers and their customers, which we did very successfully.
Talk, if you would, a bit about so Twiist is the device component.
Yeah. So Twiist.
How is it? I mean, this is an area that's getting a lot of attention from a lot of different large medical device companies. What is Twiist able to do that others maybe don't?
It's a good question. So I'll show you a picture. So that's what it looks like now. Okay. I am not 6'5". I cannot palm a basketball. So this is I'm sort of 5'9" and normal size hands. So so what the Twiist does a number of things that are different. So the most important thing it does is it is the only device that directly measures how much drug it administers every single time it administers it. Right. So what we do is 20 seconds. So you ever blow over a Coke bottle or a beer bottle when you were a kid?
Maybe once or twice, sure.
Maybe once or twice. And you made a tone, right? And then you took a sip of the Coke or beer, and then you blew over it again and you made another deeper tone. The physics of that is unbelievably complex. It actually eluded Isaac Newton, not the dumbest guy ever born. And when you do the physics of it, the only thing that matters if it's a rigid bottle is the height of the air column. So inside this little device, we basically built a itty bitty little Coke bottle. Not really. We built a little resonant chamber, and we basically measure the volume before any insulin goes into a delivery chamber. We let the insulin go into the chamber, and it deflects a little membrane. We measure again, and then we open a valve, and it goes out to the patient, and we measure actually a fourth time, and then we subtract those two. And the difference is how much I get. And we can measure that literally to billionths of a liter of accuracy. Billionths of a liter. And so why is that important? Other than being cool. It is really cool.
It is very cool.
But it's the reason it's really important is that everyone who uses these systems, and I'm going to make one very important statement. Every AID system is better than injecting yourself with a pen from the perspective of long-term outcomes. No question about it. Having said that, they have different issues than when you inject a pen. So one of the issues they have is that on average, every month, someone using these devices will have an episode of high glucose called hyperglycemia. And they have to go through this mental process. Is my pump working? Is my set where the insulin actually goes in a problem, or did I do something wrong? Did I eat too much? And what this device does is, because it measures exactly how much we give, if there is a problem anywhere between the pump and the site, meaning an occlusion, we will let you know, and we'll let you know 9 times faster than anyone else. If you look at the FDA filings, and there was a paper that was published in an engineering journal that was more of an apples to apples comparison, and it's up to 23 times faster. And so the most important thing, if you need insulin to survive, you want to know that insulin's being delivered. And so we can tell you about any problems much sooner. And it is a more significant problem than you think. A few years ago, there was a paper published that, something like 745 people in 2019 and early 2020 were admitted to ICUs or died because of something that was reported to the FDA. So these are big problems. That's the number one thing it does that's different than everyone else. And we think that ability to measure so accurately will have other advantages in the future. But right now, the one we're focused on is the ability to detect occlusions and lack of insulin delivery.
What is the actual time difference? Is it 1 second versus 23 seconds, or 1 minute versus 23 minutes?
19 minutes versus 3 or 4 hours.
Oh, okay. All right. That's
and
great.
if you look at some of the model, there's a paper that was published by a guy named David Klonoff, who's a San Francisco-based endocrinologist, who looked at modeling of when you stop getting insulin delivered, how long does it take before you get into physiologic trouble? Mm-hmm. It can be in 3 hours.
Okay.
So this is physiologically relevant. And again, it's the only reason we can do this is because we're not waiting for pressure to build up. Like everyone else has to wait for pressure to build up. Mm-hmm. We just measure directly. So, nothing got delivered, we have a problem. But we're not going to alarm immediately. We wait a little bit. Second thing that I think is important about this device is that it's the only wearable device that holds 3 cc's of insulin. And 3 cc's of insulin is 300 units, covers the needs of almost everyone with type 1 for 3 days, which is the standard wear. And as we continue to expand the wear, the more insulin you could hold, the less often you have to change your set and change your device. So we think that's another sort of really big advantage. And, third thing that we're doing is we have a really unique algorithm that drives the decision making. And it's an algorithm that was developed, actually, it's open source. let me be very specific. The algorithm that we're using is not open source. It's based on the FDA-approved Tide Pool Loop algorithm. But Tide Pool Loop was based on work that was done in an open source manner by the diabetes community. And they literally would hack into these pumps and create this app in order to be the first systems. The thing about that is that it was basically an algorithm that was built by people with diabetes for people with diabetes. It allows for the lowest set points, meaning you can target the lowest glucose without getting into trouble, which means you should get better outcomes, right? You should have more time, what's called time in range, which is the number people look at. So, three big things, then, as I mentioned earlier, available on the pharmacy benefit, and so making access easy. So those are the things that the device does differently.
So talk if you would a bit about the service component, or we use the term connected health, connecting devices to collect data and to help patients sort of interact with them. Is yours would you define your approach as highly intensive in terms of connected technologies? Does it use a lot of that?
So this device is connected to the cloud at all times. Mm-hmm. So it does. So I'll explain a little more about how it works. So all of the processing power, the algorithm itself, lives on this device. The device talks directly to a continuous glucose monitor. We don't have to go through your phone. So if you're not here, if you walk away from your phone and your phone dies, you remain in AID mode. Now you need the phone to do settings, but you can't be away from your phone forever. Then the device, because it talks to your phone and your phone talks to the cloud, we know what's happening. So if you call our customer service line, let's say you get an alarm, right? Or you have an unexplained high glucose and you call our customer service line, you say, I think my pump is broken. Well, we're going to go into our cloud and say, no, your pump is working perfectly. Or we're going to say, oh no, you do have an alarm, whatever, 2727, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. There's not we're not going to have to go through this, detailed trying to figure out what's happening with the device. We know. So that's helpful. We'll also be able to see what the glucose levels are, because we see all the glucose levels when devices alarm. Now, from a privacy perspective, which is obviously very important, all of that data that's housed in the cloud is housed in one place. It's attached to the pump serial number. No patient identifiable data. Then we have a separate place where the patient identifiable data, the patient data that connects that connects the patient to the pump ID, mm-hmm. and that allows us to feed the data back to your doctor if you approve. It allows us to feed the data back to a caregiver, again, if you approve, through what we call an Insights app, which allows your parent or loved ones to make sure that your glucose is okay. But we really try to be obviously very, very careful about personally identifiable data and make sure that you, as the user, always have control over it.
So, what has where are you in regulatory approval and commercialization?
Great question. So I'll try to answer in less than 3 hours.
This has been great. Don't contain yourself.
We have all the regulatory approvals we need for commercialization. We actually had them. We've had them for 8 or 9 months or so. Mm-hmm. We've been spending the last 8 or 9 months. Most medical device companies are companies for years before they launch a product. We will launch this product less than 2 years after forming, the company.
Wow.
So we've been spending a lot of time building all the infrastructure to be a company, right? We had to build all the Salesforce and NetSuite and quality management systems, et cetera. We've also been working with our CGM partners to connect the device and allow it to talk directly to the CGM, continuous glucose monitor, and build all the required quality interactions there. So we have our first patients are on therapy. They're using the device as we speak. We're starting a type 2 trial in a couple of weeks, and we're anticipating our commercial launch, in the second second quarter of this year. Exact date TBD. So we're well on our way to commercialization.
So, and just to be clear, so the Twiist device you showed me, that's delivering the insulin, but it's not monitoring the insulin. You're using a different device. You're partnering with another company that makes that device to do
right.
the
So
monitoring.
everyone in this space who's marketing automated insulin delivery devices, you need three things. You need the delivery device, the pump. You need to connect to a sensor. In the case of one company, they use their own sensor. Most people connect with either the Abbott, Dexcom, or both sensors, and then there's an algorithm, which generally most people are using proprietary algorithms. We've chosen to try to take a more open approach, and over time we'll hope to have more than one algorithm available for people.
So you've got a great deal of experience in the space. In terms of the broader healthcare ecosystem, how do you anticipate Twiist and Sequel fitting into that world, working with larger PMs? Because you have a lot of larger competitors. Perhaps they have more leverage than you do, more bargaining power, but you are obviously see yourself as offering something they don't. So how does a small company like Sequel compete in a world dominated by bigger players?
Very carefully. No. So it's a really good question. If you talk to the payers writ large, one thing that's interesting about medicine or healthcare is innovation in every other space tends to lower costs. I mean, everyone's familiar with Moore's law. I think everyone's familiar with the genome sequencing equivalent, which is even more dramatic with how fast the cost of these things come down. Healthcare is different. Technology tends to go up in price, and so when you talk to payers, they're all about innovation they want innovation at a lower cost. And when we were forming the company and raising money, several investors said, this device is so incredible. Why aren't you premium pricing it? And I sort of said to people, you can premium price it. That's fine. You just need someone else as the CEO, right? Because like I said, I spent my entire career trying to lower the cost of therapy. So we brought this to market. This is an incredible device, incredibly sophisticated engineering, but we're bringing it to market at a lower price than the competitor on the pharmacy benefit, and we can do that for a couple of different reasons. One, the device, so it's called Twiist because it twists apart.
Okay.
This piece gets reused. This has got a battery, the pumping mechanism, the microprocessors, the radios, etc. I keep this. The only thing I'm throwing away every day or every 3 days is this, which is a piece of plastic. It's got some really important stuff like the measurement chamber that I talk about. That little Coke bottle is actually underneath there. So we're able to very efficiently manufacture, and we'll get more and more efficient as we get more scale, to keep costs under control. So by bringing this message of innovation at lower cost, we've had an incredible response from the payer community, where we are on formulary right now on two largest PBMs, and I anticipate that by launch we'll be on formulary for all four of the largest PBMs, and almost half of the Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, they tend to have their own, they're called custom formulas, so we're working our way through those. So we're estimating we'll have over 100 million covered lives that have access to this when we launch. And that's on a basis of 180 million kind of commercially insured lives. And we're working on kind of Med D and all the government programs, just take a little bit longer.
Final question, I think. Sometimes I ask another one, but how do you see this fitting in with patients and physicians? Do you see it changing that relationship at all with if the patients give the access to the data to the physicians? Do you see this changing how care is managed in any significant way?
So that's a good question and a big question. So the opportunity in this space right now is, despite the fact that AIDs have been around for 5 or 6 years, and insulin pumps have been around for literally 50. It's a market that has a lot of unmet needs. Mm-hmm. Only about 40% of people who should be using these devices are. And of the ones that are, a certain amount, maybe 5-10%, switch every year, which tells me that despite having better outcomes than a pen, and being around for a while, there's a lot of unmet need. And so I think the first thing that we're going to be able to do is bring more choice, more options with a different feature set than others. So people, and there's no magic bullet that says everyone is going to choose our device versus someone else's. People are going to make decisions for all sorts of different reasons. Mm-hmm. But we're trying to identify, and design to meet the needs of as many people as we could, right? So for the people who want to use a pen because they know when they go like that, they got their insulin, I can pretty confidently tell you, when I tell you you're getting insulin through Twiist, you're getting insulin through Twiist. For people who don't like other algorithms because they don't want a set point of 110 or 100 on their glucose, they want to be at 78. We can address that. For people who want to wear discreetly a device, but they need more than 100 units. They need 100 units a day. We can meet those needs. So we're really trying to bring that choice to the market to create more options for physicians and patients. Physicians have access to data now. All of the existing devices, through one way or another, get the information back to physicians. So I don't think there's going to be a huge difference there. Mm-hmm. I'm hopeful that some of the things we're doing around customer service and putting everything in one box reduces the burden on offices as well as reducing the burden on patients.
Fantastic. All right. Well, this has been a great story and some really welcome perspectives on the broader healthcare challenges. Is it good to be back in medtech again?
I'm having a great time. I love the technology, and I love talking with Dean about what are the next iterations and the next things we can do. It's really the thing that I find so fascinating is that one of the things I think that differentiates Dean and the things he does is they really focus on first principles. So when you learn something with Dean, you learn the physics. So when we went out and raised money, every person who we talked to walked away able to pass the high school AP exam in physics. So it was just a ton of fun, and we've had the ability to build the company we all want to work in. So it has been such a pleasure and honor to build a team from scratch, to organize things, to eliminate some of the big company corporate hypocrisy and bureaucracy. It hasn't all been peaches and cream. We've had lots of fits and starts, but that's been just an incredible experience as well. It's like the team has come together and in such an open-minded way to do things differently and to work, far more collaboratively than I think any of us have ever done before. Mm-hmm. It's been really fantastic.
Great. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Great. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's been fun, great questions, and we'll talk with you soon.
Well, that is a wrap. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. It's great having you here. I hope you'll join us at DeviceTalks Minnesota on June 11th and DeviceTalks Boston on April 30th and May 1st. You can find websites going to both at DeviceTalks.com. You can also find the registration page for our upcoming DeviceTalks Tuesdays brought to you by VitalPath. That'll be March 25th at 4 p.m. Eastern. Would love to have you as part of that conversation. Of course, please do subscribe to the DeviceTalks Podcast Network so you don't miss any of our future episodes. And we'd love to follow your MedTech conversations on LinkedIn. Connect with me, connect with Chris Newmarker, connect with Kayleen Brown, our managing editor. And of course, make sure you follow DeviceTalks and Mass Device. Well, that's it, folks. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast.